4 months ago, I started volunteering at a study club in Grangetown, where I help students to understand the material more, which they didn't really get at school. So at some point, I had a very strange conversation with one of them. He was doing his biology booklet and got several questions wrong. I corrected him and proposed to explain the material, to which he responded, "I need to do my booklet." Well, then I said, "Let me clarify a couple of points so that you would get the next question right." The answer was the same: "I need to do my booklet." And I wasn't shocked or anything, I was just really upset. And that provoked me to think, was this boy the same at the age of 5? Because just think about it, 5-year-old children ask questions about the color of the sky and the taste of food, about how plants grow and the train schedule. What makes those curious minds to fade out? And I discovered that's the approach of rather learning than thinking, the approach of focusing on single subjects from birth and neglecting the others. How many times I heard, "I'm bad at maths, that is not my subject," when it turns out to be that the person just didn't apply consistent efforts over a sufficient period of time. People who study humanities tend to think that they're bad at mathematics because their brain is built that way. However, I think that the problem is in social bias towards this opinion, which leads to the lack of commitment. Anyway, today we're going to explore a very popular question nowadays: nature versus nurture, in terms of intelligence and brain development. We're going to try to uncover the mystery of a big question of modern neuroscience. What made you the person you are? So let's decode what nature versus nurture actually means and introduce 2 major variables in this brain equation: genetics and experience. So we can transform our question even further by saying which one matters most. To answer that, we need to get down to the brain structure. And first of all, it is vital to understand that in all humans, brain regions are arranged in a similar way. So on the following MRI scans, we can see a response, an average response of several humans to navigation stimuli. As you may see, navigation areas are arranged similarly in all scanned people. So does that imply that we have some innate arrangement of brain regions that is given to us at birth and cannot be changed in any way? That is not actually true. In the year 2000, there was an experiment conducted on ferrets which investigated the wiring of the brain. Just imagine, there are some distinct pathways which lead from our retina to our occipital lobes, which are situated at the back of our head and are majorly responsible for visual processing, indicated as P1 on the drawing. There are some other pathways which lead from our ears to our auditory cortex, which is stated here in temporal lobes, and are majorly responsible for auditory processing, indicated as A1 on the drawing. So researchers physically rewired the brain, redirecting the pathways from retina to the auditory A1 lobes. The thing is that for the first couple of weeks of their life, ferrets, yeah, those cute ferrets, are born absolutely blind, and they do not receive visual stimuli at all. So the first time they were able to see something is when their brain was already rewired. And you know what? Visual areas developed at the places where auditory areas should have been. That means that the brain is a highly malleable construct which forms in response to the environment. Can we project the same idea on humans without formal investigation? Well, probably not, but we can assume that all human brains are built in a similar way because they are wired similarly. What makes the difference is the experience which we receive during our life. And it is the experience which makes every single one of us so special. So let's transform this concept of experience being a primary thing in determining our personality on the quality of an individual, which is often considered, well, some kind of a gift: intelligence. Intelligence is arguably valued the most in our nowadays society. Just look at us, we're trying to achieve A stars and win Olympiads, publish researchers, and so on. But for such an important quality, it's increasingly hard to measure. We all know that IQ test is a kind of a strange thing. We can argue in many ways with its validity, such as the presence of emotional, motivational, cultural, and even physical biases. However, I'm just going to give you some food for thought. So in South America, there is a tribe which speaks Piraha language. Astonishingly, no number words are present in the Piraha language. So they cannot say it's 1 apple or 5 oranges. They just do not have this vocabulary. There are some words for abstract quantities, though. So the researchers from MIT in 2008 investigated their ability to count. On the presented graph, we can see 5 experiments conducted of increasing difficulty. It's very surprising that in the first 2 experiments, the members of the Piraha tribe were able to successfully complete the task. So they can count, even without the ability to express it in words. Does it imply that the absence of number words in their language makes them less intelligent or more stupid than the other tribes in South America? Well, arguably not, because the same research group thoroughly investigated their language and understood that they have a vivid vocabulary to express the environmental qualities. They do not see the world with numbers. They see the world with adjectives, which opens an absolutely different perspective on the environment. Unfortunately, the investigators didn't have an opportunity to scan the Piraha people. However, we can assume that they would have much more deprived number areas than any of the persons sitting in this room. So how it is even possible that 2 individuals of the same species would have such a major difference in their brain structure? Here comes our old friend experience. Let's analyze the difference in the child's and adult's brain while solving a simple linguistic task. We'll see a clear trend to lateralization of functions, which basically means that when you're a child, you have a big core network which is approximately situated into your prefrontal cortex. And while you grow up, the selection of specific regions can be observed, and those regions drift to the sides of your brain because of experience being obtained during your life. Does this mean that without prior experience you would not develop those regions? Well, we don't know. But the point I'm trying to make is that a child, because of having only one tool to solve and approach almost any problem, is desperately trying to improve. While when we grow up, we tend to get comfortable with the number of tools we have and stop. Development is not about having one multi-tool to approach any task. It's about constantly extending your toolbox. Obviously, all these hypotheses are very interesting and fascinating. However, when it comes to real justification, scientists tend to back up. Because, to be honest, the best way to prove something in science is the investigation of the causal reason. And the easiest way to investigate the causal reason is to take something away and see what happens. I'm not saying that neuroscientists from Harvard Medical School specifically took something away in the year 2017. However, they completely deprived the monkeys from facial perception. So the monkeys, for the first couple of months of their life, were able to interact and socialize. They just didn't see faces. That was reached by the masks worn on the people who were taking care of them. On the following brain scans, we can see the face-deprived monkeys on my left and the control monkeys on my right. As you may see, the face patches did not develop in face-deprived monkeys at all. The face patches are circled by white lines. So that is a strong evidence to assume that the experience is required for the development of face areas. Obviously, it's not that easy to prove something in developmental neuroscience. For example, if something pops out during maturation period, that doesn't specifically mean it was influenced by environment. It could be suppressed by hormones or even physical constraints. So, were you actually smarter at the age of 5? According to preceding evidence, we can claim that experience plays, if not the main, but certainly a noticeable role in shaping our personality. And simultaneously, if we consider curiosity and desire to learn as keys to intelligence, yes, you were, because you were trying to get the most out of any experience you possibly had. All in all, neuroscience is almost a pure mystery. And as you could already understand from my speech, we don't know answers to any of the questions yet. How would rewiring of the brains affect our most close relatives, monkeys? Can we develop new brain regions during mature age period? And finally, does experience really matter more than genetics? This speech is not about answering any of this. This speech is to make you reflect on your experience. My takeaway is simple. Mathematicians should read Kant, and philosophers solve trigonometry. Historians should know the basics of immunology, and biologists the 7th year's war. I'm not saying that you should be an expert in every area, but please try exploring different fields. Who knows, you might like it. Don't think that you cannot change the way you think. Thank you so much.